Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Distance Learning Program. It's great to be here with you today, and I hope you're enjoying the videos. Today's lesson is going to be Lesson 6F on page 80. We're going to start by talking about diagrams. Diagrams. And it says, read and understand a pie chart. The picture that you see on page 80 is a pie chart, and it's an example of a diagram. So I'm going to write the word diagram on the board for you here. And I'd like for you to think about what are the different types of diagrams that you might be familiar with. It's D-I-A-G-R-A-M, and it's pronounced diagram. A diagram is a drawing or a chart. So think of the different kinds of diagrams that you're familiar with. One of the diagrams that you might be familiar with is called a bar graph. Bar graph. And another one is a graphic organizer. The one that we're going to look at today is called a pie chart. And there are many other kinds of diagrams, but these are some examples of diagrams. So, usually they're used to organize information or make it easy for you to understand. So, if we look on page 80 in the Ventures3 book, we're in the Ventures3 book today, okay, on page 80, we're going to learn about how to interpret a pie chart. It says at the top, this is the title, it says, Time Use of Working Parents. And this circle shows the entire day, which says total equals 24 hours down here. So this is the entire day. The circle shows the whole number of hours in the day. And then let's look at the different categories that are on the pie chart. It begins here. The yellow little slice of the pie is other, and it says 1.5 hours. Or 1.5 hours. Then, caring for family members, 1.2 hours. And notice that this green slice, which is 1.2 hours, is a little bit smaller than the yellow slice, which is 1.5 hours. So it's important to note that the size of the slices corresponds to the number of hours for each of the different categories. So naturally, 1.2 is smaller than 1.5, so the green slice is going to be a little bit smaller than the yellow slice. Next, it says eating and drinking, 1.0 hours. And that's smaller than the 1.2 slice. Then, household activities, 1.1 hours. Leisure and sports, that's leisure is relaxing or recreation. And it says 2.6 hours. Then over here in the bottom right corner, it says working 8.8 hours. And finally, the blue slice up here in the top right says sleeping 7.8 hours. And down below the chart, it says time use on average workday for employed persons ages 25 to 54 with children. And over here on the right, it tells where this pie chart comes from. It says Bureau of Labor Statistics, American Time Use Survey. So, you can see that all of these slices correspond to the different number of hours for each category. They correspond in size. So the size of the slice is proportional to the number of hours in the day that is spent at that doing that activity. Okay? Now, let's see if we can answer the questions and look at part A, and I will ask you all of the questions and see if you can find out what the answers are. So the first question says, who is the chart about? Who is the chart about? And these are the possible answers. It says employed people with children, employed people without children, unemployed people with children, or none of the above. Now, employed means that the person is working, the parent is working. And unemployed means they're not working. Remember, un is a prefix that you put before a word, which means not. And remember, at the beginning, when we were looking at the pie chart, right below the pie chart, it says time use on an average workday for employed persons. And so it says employed persons age 25 to 54 with children. So the answer to number 1 is employed people with children. So it's answer A. Number 2, it says which activity do these people spend the least time doing? Now, least means the smallest amount of time. And that means that we would look at the pie chart and try to find the activity that is the least amount of time. Okay, so if you look at the size of the slices, that would mean it's going to be the smallest piece of the pie. Now, the one that I see is eating and drinking for 1.0 hours. That's the number that's the smallest on the pie chart. So that activity is the one that corresponds with the activity that has the least amount of time. And so the answer would be B, eating and drinking, because it says caring for family members, eating and drinking, household activities, or none of the above. And you can see that eating and drinking has 1.0 hours associated with it, which means that that activity is the smallest, and that would be the answer. Number 3, it says, which activity do these people spend the most time doing? Now, the most is the greatest amount of time. So least is the smallest amount of time, and most is the greatest. So if we look at the different categories, we see eating and drinking, leisure and sports, working, and none of the above. So what we want to do is we want to look at the pie chart and see which area corresponds to the greatest amount of time. Well, that's the biggest slice of the pie. And that's this bottom one here on the right where it says working. So the answer would be C, because 8.8 hours is spent working, and that's the largest amount of time for any activity on the chart. So that would be the correct answer. Finally, it says, which statement is true? A says people spend less time working than eating, drinking, and sleeping combined. All right, so if we look at A, and it says people spend less time working than eating and drinking and sleeping combined. So sleeping is 7.8 hours and eating and drinking is 1 hour. So combined means you add them together. So that would be 8.8 hours. And what about working? It says spend less time working than eating and drinking and sleeping combined. So working says 8.8 hours. Well, that's exactly the same amount. So then that means that they do not spend less time working than eating and drinking combined, because they spend the same amount of time working as they do eating, drinking, and sleeping. So since the numbers are the same, 8.8 equals 8.8, then that would not be correct, because people do not spend less time. Okay? Next, it says people spend more time working than eating and drinking and sleeping combined. Well, we just said that both of them are 8.8. Eating, drinking, and sleeping is 8.8, and working is 8.8. So they do not spend more time doing the working than they do eating, sleeping, and drinking. So that would not be correct. Finally, C says people spend as much time working as eating, drinking, and sleeping combined. Well, as much time means the same amount. So they do spend as much time working as they sleep, eat, and drink. So therefore, the answer to that question would be C.